Alright, hello everyone and welcome back. In this video we're going to talk about reducing fractions. Reducing fractions is an essential skill when we're working with fractions, right? Now, what does it mean to reduce a fraction? Basically, the idea is not every fraction we get is going to be in simplest form. Now, what does it mean to be in simplest form? Well, if we look at the numerator and the denominator of a fraction, the top number and the bottom number of a fraction, we're curious if there are other numbers that go into both the top and the bottom of a fraction. If the answer to that question is yes, meaning there is a number or more numbers that go into the top and bottom number of a fraction, it is not reduced. It is not simplified. However, if you look at the fraction and you say, all right, there is no number that goes into both the top number and the bottom number of a fraction, then you can say it is reduced or simplified. So let's take a look at how we can do that right now. So here's an example of a fraction, 2 over 4, fairly simple fraction. And looking at the numerator 2 and the denominator 4, we ask ourselves, is there a number that goes into both 2 and 4? The answer to that question is yes, right? We know 2 goes into both 2 and 4, right? Both 2 and 4 can be divided by 2. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to do that division right now. We're going to divide the top by 2 and the bottom by 2. In dividing both of these numbers by 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So I've reduced this fraction to 1 over 2. And once again, I need to ask myself the question, is there a number which goes into both the top, 1, and the bottom, 2? Technically, the answer to that is yes, 1, right? 1 goes into both of these numbers, but if I were to divide the top and bottom by 1, I would get the same thing back. I would still get 1 over 2. So here, we want to think about, are there any numbers that go into the top and bottom other than 1? And in this case, the answer is no, which means that 1 over 2 is our reduced fraction. A quick tip for you is that if the numerator is 1, you're done, okay? If you get to a numerator of 1, you're automatically done. You don't even have to check anymore. But that's not always the case. You're not always going to get down to a 1, so you need to know, is there a number that goes into the top and bottom? If the answer is no, then it's fully reduced. Let's take a look at another example. Here we have 20 over 50. Once again, we want to ask ourselves, is there a number which goes into both the top and the bottom? Absolutely there is. There's actually several options. Let's pick the largest one now. Let's divide the top and bottom by 10. And we know 10 goes into both of these numbers because, well, they all have a 0 at the end. So if I divide the top by 10 and the bottom by 10, I get 20 divided by 10, which is 2, and 50 divided by 10, which is 5. Now that I have this new fraction, I have to ask myself, is there any number that goes into both 2 and 5? The answer to that question is no, which would mean that this is our reduced fraction. Now, you might be saying, oh, I didn't think of 10 right off the bat. That's okay. There are other ways that we can do this. You don't have to jump to the largest one. If we reconsider 20 over 50, I always think start small. Think of the smallest number that you can think of that goes into both 2 and 20. Obviously, it's easier to pick a big number because it's fewer divisions, but we can start with small numbers. So I know, for example, that both of these are divisible by 2. I can divide 20 by 2 and I can divide 50 by 2. 20 divided by 2 is 10. 50 divided by 2 is 25. Now I have a new fraction, 10 over 25, and I ask myself that same question. Is there a number that goes into both 10 and 25, that goes into both the top and the bottom? The answer here is yes, again, right? Both of these numbers are divisible by 5. So I'm going to do that division. 10 divided by 5 is 2, and 25 divided by 5 is 5. And sure enough, we get to the same exact point we did before. So even if you can't come up with large numbers that go into both the numerator and the denominator, you can work with any number that goes into both, and you can keep breaking the numbers down into smaller and smaller pieces until you get to that final answer. And remember, we know the final answer is the final answer. When you ask yourself the question, is there a number which goes into both the top and the bottom? And the answer is no. That means you found the fully reduced fraction. Alright guys, check back in for more examples. I'll see you next time.